Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today is Ben Guttmann, and we're going to be talking about his book. Simply put, why clear messages win and how to design them. Ben, I'm going to ask you to talk about yourself in a moment, but I really enjoyed this.
Oh.
You were on our digital download, and I really enjoyed. I spent an hour with you on there, and the message is just so obvious. But being obvious isn't necessarily something that we all do. We need to talk in simple language. See, I can't even say simple language, and what you do is you press that point home. So I really enjoyed this. So where can people find you?
I appreciate that. That's high praise coming from you, Tim. And I had a lot of fun on that show as well. So it's great to be back here with you. If you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Ben Guttmann. You can find me on my website at benguttmann.com. It's not very radio friendly. You have to have the 2 T's and the 2 N's in Guttmann. But if you go there, there's a blog. I have a newsletter I send out every Tuesday. That's totally free. And that just went out this morning. But if you have any questions beyond that, feel free to reach out, send me an email. I'd love to see how this book has been helpful to somebody.
So you've got an interesting background, which is you use this a lot in your book. It's not like a book based on. It's not Ben's opinion. It's actually Ben's experience. Because you started a marketing agency, didn't you, a number of years ago, and then sold it. But it's your experience from that, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's a big part of it, right? So I ran a marketing agency for 10 years. I had a ton of fun doing that. We worked with brands like the NFL and I Love New York and all these really great clients. I sold that business about 2 years ago. And I also, in the past 10 years, have spent a lot of the time in the classroom. So I'm an adjunct professor at Baruch College here in New York. And so what was interesting about that is I would see the same problems in the boardroom and in the classroom, right? People would have something to say. They have something to share. They have a thing they want to do and create and connect in the world, and they have a really hard time getting it out there. That's why you hire a marketing agency a lot of times, right? Is to get your ideas from your head to somebody else's head. And so part of that experience definitely colored the book, and I wouldn't have been able to write this without having both of those experiences. But I also took it kind of a step further. I didn't want it to be my opinion. I didn't even want it to be just my war stories or anything. I did a lot of research and looked at, what is the science of communication, right? What does the data show? What does the academic literature show about how we communicate, how we can be more effective at doing it, and kind of how to package that in a way which is applicable to a lot of different folks.
Yeah, some of the things that some of the things that we face is that we're trying to get something over, and of course we are experts on it, but the other person isn't. I mean, I go to so many websites, and they're completely indecipherable about what they do, and that's because what they've done is that they've sat down with a web designer, and the web designer said, "So tell me what you do." And then the web designer just types in what the person says, and of course you actually don't understand from a simple language, do we?
I'm glad you brought up websites, because I end up talking about websites a lot in my in my work, because they're not the sexiest thing, right? They've been around for 30 years. They're not the new cool app or platform or whatever it is that gets all the headlines and Ad Age or whatever. But it's been around for 30 years for a reason, right? And it will probably be around for another 30 years. It's an open platform. It's something that is, in many cases, the biggest single manifestation of your brand and of your message, right? Unless you have a retail store, you're not going to get bigger than your website in terms of how your message touches your audience. So if you get that right, you're going to get everything else right, ultimately. And actually, I was just giving a presentation to a number of folks in the tourism industry, and so that's a space I've spent a lot of time in. I mentioned I Love New York before, but also Visit California, Empire State Building, and I was giving a presentation to a bunch of folks there, and I said one of the biggest sins you could do is, like, it's a big don't put in your hero, your main section, that big fat video or photo you put there, don't put the text of just the name of your place again. So let's say it's New York City. You don't want just the big headline image to be New York City. People know it's New York, that it's Visit New York or whatever the equivalent uh, destination is. They went to it. They click. If it's Visit California, they went to visitcalifornia.com. The logo says Visit California. The page title says Visit California. And you know what? Several times throughout the site, it's going to talk about the words Visit California. You don't need just California as your headline there. It should be something that gets your attention and convinces somebody that they want to receive the rest of your message.
So what's the case for simplicity then?
So the kind of mechanism behind simplicity is this idea of fluency, right? And so we've heard the word fluency before, right? I can be fluent in English or Spanish or Mandarin. I can be fluent in what I'm interested in. I can be fluent in a favorite TV show or in a video game, whatever it is. Where we're fluent, things are easy. That's the Latin root of the word is flowing, right? And that's kind of what it feels like when things are easy. But if you ask a cognitive scientist about that word, what they're going to say is, well, that describes how easy is it for you to get something from out in the world, stick it in your head, and make sense of it, right? How easy is it to perceive something, to understand something, and take action on something? And all the research points to the easier something is, the more fluent something is, the more we like it, the more we trust it, and the more we buy it. Right? You can see this in stock ticker symbols. You can see it in resumes. You can see it in academic literature. You can see it in every different venue we look at. E-commerce, talk about websites, is that the faster a website loads, the more people are going to spend money on that website. The easier something is, it aligns with all the different goals that we have in terms of all our marketing or entrepreneurship or whatever. But the inverse is also true, right? If things are hard to read, hard to see, hard to understand, too much jargon, well, we don't like it, we don't trust it, and we don't buy it, which is not what we're trying to do most of the time.
Yeah, yes, I see LinkedIn posts. Yeah, I've been in the IT market for a number of years, and I know quite a lot about IT, and I see these posts, and I don't know what they're talking about.
Oh yeah.
And I've actually left comments saying, I don't understand. There'll be like a photo. There's one recently which was something to do with Wi-Fi, and so they were writing in protocols. Isn't it great that So I actually wrote, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you explain? And they came back, and the answer was more complex than the original post. But I guess if you're buying Wi-Fi systems, you probably know about the protocol PF735 or whatever. So, and it's the crime. You talk in the book about the crime of complicated.
Oh yeah. And so what you're talking about is absolutely true. It's something that I see all the time. And so we complicate because it's easy. There's a place to hide behind, right? If we don't know what we're talking about, a lot of times we can kind of use the wall of words as a way to defend ourselves. We can also use it to kind of cover up perceived inadequacies that we have. And so you hit upon something, which there's a couple studies I cite, which I really love. And so one of them is if you look at graduate school applications, I believe it was Stanford. Correct me if I apologize if I'm wrong about the institution it came from. They took graduate school applications and they said, okay, we're going to take a regular set here, and we're going to take a set of the same essays, but we're going to make them more complicated. Right? We're going to add bigger words and use more jargon and kind of just use a thesaurus to swap out things for the fancier language. And you would think intuitively, well, it's bigger words, must be a smarter person, probably is going to get accepted more often to the graduate school. The exact opposite was true. Is when reviewers looked at the two stacks of essays, they said the stack of essays with the simpler language was rated as more intelligent and more likely to be admitted to the graduate school. The stack of essays that were kind of dialed up in terms of their language and jargon, well, they were less intelligent and they were less likely to be admitted. And it worked the opposite way too. They took the language and they made it simpler, and actually that ended up helping the reviewers say, hey, this is actually better. These are better essays over here. They did this with all sorts of other pieces of writing as well. And so that's one example of saying, okay, what's the efficacy of something being simpler or being more complicated? But the other story that I love to tell about this is another set of researchers, I believe at the University of Pennsylvania. They looked at how do different groups communicate about who they are? How do they use language to kind of showcase their own authority or their own expertise or size? So they looked at airports. And in the United States, there's about 130 or so international airports. And an international airport could be something as big as, JFK over here in New York with thousands of flights. You and I, before the call, were just talking about Heathrow with also, thousands of flights. Or it could be, some one flight a week airport in upstate New York or Montana or something like that, that just kind of crosses the border into Canada. And so when you look at these two buckets, the small airports and the big airports, the researchers said, how do they describe themselves? And they found that the small airports were much more likely to use the word international to describe themselves, as calling themselves, JFK International Airport instead of just saying JFK. Because the word international carries this kind of, authority and prestige along with it. But so the small airports were about twice as likely to use the word international as the large airports were in terms of their own marketing descriptions of themselves. And we people will see the same pattern came up when they were looked at people from the higher Ivy League schools and the lower Ivy League schools, right? To how do they use the word Ivy to describe them, right? And so this came up again and again, and I love this angle of it too, because it shows that we are more likely to use these big words, these big status symbols, to project something that we're not, and it kind of gives away. It gives us away more than we think it does. I think I lost your audio there. I don't know if that's.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that quite often when we talk about our brand is that we kind of miss the point. So there's a story, isn't it, that you tell in the book about the different about drills and holes.
Oh yeah. So this is a great one. So I actually tell this to my students every semester. I say, if you don't remember anything else from my class, from your entire degree here, if you remember this one sentence, you're going to be ahead of most people in marketing, most people in business. And it's not even my sentence. It's from Theodore Levitt, who taught at Harvard in the 60s. He said, people don't want a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. Okay? They don't want a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. We don't want the thing. We want what the thing does for us, right? We don't want the feature. We want the benefit. And if you've ever worked in sales, ever worked in marketing, that's one of those things you kind of learn on day one, right? People don't buy features. They buy benefits. I don't care that the drill has, this much battery power on it. I care that the drill lasts longer so I can get my job done quicker, right? Like those are the type of things that are so instrumental in how we make decisions, how we pay attention to things. But we are often overlooking those things in favor of talking about features, because the features, they remain as visible as always. We always see the features, because crack open your 5 senses. What does something taste like or look like or smell like? And those describe features. Those are tangible. We see what the button is. We see what the silicone grip on the drill is. We see all these different things. But the benefits are more abstract, right? Because they exist in the world of the user, or even just in the head or the heart of the user. And we don't see those. And so it's harder for us to immediately connect to those if we don't put the thinking in to get there.
Yeah, I think that I think we've discussed before about how actually quite often it might not, you've got a drill and it may be about a hole, but it actually may be because you need to put some shelves up.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be a reason why you need to put those shelves up, and so actually you need to get a drill, and so in terms of the it passes, it may be there's certain other pressures on you to basically the reason why you buy a drill.
Absolutely.
But I think quite often what happens is that, and you talk about this in the book, and I love this, and love this way that you've talked about the simplistic language, and I've been trying to do this and actually use these techniques, because one of the things you talk about is the and, isn't it? about what we do is that we say there's this feature and this feature and this feature and this feature, because of course we're really excited about it because it pays our mortgage if you buy one.
Oh yeah, the word "and" has this magical ability to tie together a bunch of things that may not necessarily be related, but don't kind of feel awkward all of a sudden. So if you use the word "and," you can tie those things together into one grammatically correct English sentence. And I always try to kind of referee my use of the word "and" when I'm talking about it. And you're able to kind of say it without raising any red flags. You can say, well, this we're going to be the fastest and the cheapest, and you're going to be the happiest with our product because our customer service is great. And I kind of butchered that bad example there a little bit, but the point is, if we replace the word "and" with the word "so," at least in our drafts, at least in our kind of internal thinking about it, that starts to raise those red flags that get ignored when you have the word "and." The word "and" kind of just papers over it. The word "so," you kind of tie those things together, and all of a sudden you go, well, actually, that X doesn't lead to Y, right? X is not quite related to Y, and we end up in a situation where we can see with better clarity that these are two ideas or three ideas together instead of them being one. And ultimately, when you're looking to communicate, we have such a small window of somebody's attention, of somebody's time, that if we're trying to communicate more than one thing at once, it's like juggling too many balls. We don't just drop one; everything kind of collapses.
Yeah, I think most people can only, in terms of if you read a white paper, you only remember one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think quite often, well, what happens is that everybody tries to cram in everything they know into the white paper, and in fact, nobody remembers it. So it's about keeping your word simple. You also talk about in the book, it's getting towards the end, about examples of minimal and non-minimal messages, don't you?
Oh yeah. So minimal, when we talk about in this context, there's an important distinction here. We're talking about fluency and not brevity when we talk about simplicity. It's very easy to think simple and say, well, this means the fewest number of words or the fewest number of paragraphs or pages or slides or whatever metric we're measuring. But that's not actually what the important thing is. We don't actually always care if it's the fewest number of words. We care that it's the least amount of friction, right? And so friction is is when something kind of is difficult, right? It kind of rubs up, and it stops you a little bit. It gives you a pause to say, "Hey, I'm going to pay attention to something else." And often they're related, right? Brevity is correlated with
Yep.
something being simple, but it's not the same thing. And I like to always use an example of, if you've ever filled out a form, right, for market research, right? We talk about market research a lot in the book. If you ever gotten something from a brand you bought a pair of shoes from at some point, they send you this form. On that first page of the form, there's just a couple questions, right? And then it gets to a couple more questions. They get a couple more as the form goes through pages 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it's going to be. By breaking it up into multiple pages, that actually ends up being an easier process for us cognitively than if it was all on one page, right? If we opened up that form and it was 40 questions right in front of me, I'm saying, well, I'm not going to do that, right? But by doing it over the course of several different steps, we're more likely to finish inputting our data, finish inputting our opinion, and get through the process. E-commerce, we talked about e-commerce before, same thing, right? Often you don't see what you used to see. If you go back 20 years ago to e-commerce websites, it was, here's the one big page at the checkout, right? That has, give me your billing information, give me your shipping information, select your, if you have insurance, you may get a alert, and you see 40 different fields there. But again, that is kind of daunting at that point. So what you see, if you look at what Amazon does, and Amazon has more data points than anybody else in the world, several steps that you go through to end up checking out, right? You select the shipping here, you select the billing there, and then you eventually get to the point where you click and confirm to get out of there, instead of it being all just one really difficult thing. So it's more pages, it's more steps, but it paradoxically is an easier, less friction process.
You use there's an advert that you said that's used, which as an example where it's not about minimal, as you said, wording. It's about actually getting the message across. And I'm just going to, and the message, I think, as an advert was, floss the teeth that you want to keep.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I use this when I talk about empathy a lot too, which is, so this was not even an advertisement. This was my dentist. I've had bad luck with my dental genetics, I guess. And I've ended up at the dentist more times than I want to. And so one day after some particularly painful appointment, the dentist just tells me, you only have to floss the teeth you want to keep. And all of a sudden, it just clicked. It was exactly the language that I needed to hear. It was exactly the framing that I needed to hear. And since then, I've lost every single night, right? And so it's been, if you look at what my old dentist would have said, something like floss below the gum line to prevent plaque buildup and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I know it's true. I know it's important, but it wasn't something that clicked in the same way that you only have to floss the teeth you want to keep would click for me.
And it's just genius in terms of its simple wording, but it also gets the story over at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, it's easy language to understand. We're not talking about gum line and plaque and all these different things. Because each one of these big words is another bit of friction, right? Every bit of friction is an opportunity for somebody to say, that's it. Stop the ride. I'm getting off. And go pay attention to one of the thousands of other things that are competing for our attention at every single moment.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. Simply put, why clear messages win and how to design them. Fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
If I wanted to buy a copy, where would I get a copy from?
Again, that's high prize. High praise. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Tim. This has been a ton of fun. If you want to learn more, again, go to benguttmann.com, 2 T's, 2 N's and Guttmann. And you can download a free chapter there if you're interested to get started. Otherwise, go buy the book everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent booksellers. All the links are on the website as well.
And where can I get hold of you?
So again, website's the best place to start because you can go to my blog, my newsletter. Also, LinkedIn is where I'm kind of hanging out most of the time. So find me on there, send me a follow, send me a message. Love to hear from you.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on and talk about your book. It's excellent. Really enjoyed it. And thanks for the chat today.